I never imagined that at 47 years old I'd be standing outside my own daughter's engagement party, listening to her laughter echo through the walls, the same laughter she once used to mock me. She had called me uneducated, embarrassing, outdated. That night, I stood alone in the corridor, holding a tray of sweets she refused to take from my hands. "Mom, please don't talk to anyone," she had whispered earlier, her smile painted for her guests. "You wouldn't understand these people. They're not like you." Her words slid through my heart like glass. I had raised her alone, with burnt fingers, torn saris, and a smile that never quite healed. And now, she called me uneducated in front of people who didn't even know my name. But as I watched her fiancé whisper something into another girl's ear and saw my daughter's fake smile freeze for the first time, I realized that silence can sometimes sound like justice warming up its voice. Karma doesn't rush. It waits for the right stage, the right lights, and the right audience. By midnight, my daughter would break, not because of my curse, but because of her choices. And when the phone finally rang, trembling with her sobs, I answered it with steady breath. "Now you understand," I said softly, "why I warned you. Stay till the end, because betrayal has a strange habit of coming home, wearing the same ring you once called love." When my husband died, my daughter Emma was barely 6. I remember that day as clearly as the lines on my palms. The rain, the white sheet over his body, the quiet gasp that left my chest and never truly returned. After that, life didn't ask me what I wanted. It simply handed me what was left. A one-bedroom apartment with a flickering bulb, a half-broken dresser, and a little girl with eyes too big for her small face. I mended old clothes for neighbors, patched school uniforms, and pressed the same faded dress every Sunday so she could believe her mother owned more than one. I never complained. Poverty, I learned, isn't the loudest thing in a home. Shame is. And I refused to let her feel it. Every night, I'd sew until my fingers went numb. Emma would fall asleep beside the machine, her tiny hand resting on my knee, murmuring half-dreams about being rich someday. "Rich how?" I'd ask, smiling. "With lights, Mom." And mirrors. She loved mirrors. She said they showed the life she wanted, bright, beautiful, untouchable. When she turned 12, I used every dollar I'd saved to buy her first private school uniform. She looked at the price tag and whispered, "Are we poor, Mom?" I smiled. "We're fine." That was the first lie I told her, not out of fear, but protection, because children don't need the truth. They need hope. But as she grew, hope started turning into hunger. She began to notice the small things. How other girls got dropped off in cars, how their mothers wore perfume, how mine smelled of starch and coffee. She stopped holding my hand in public. She stopped calling me Mommy. And one day she started calling me just Mom. Short, sharp, distant. At 16, she won a scholarship to a private college in the city. I pawned my wedding ring to pay her hostel deposit. She cried that night, hugged me tight, said, "One day I'll buy you a house, Mom." And I believed her. Because every mother believes, even when the world never pays back kindness with gratitude. The years passed. Our phone calls grew shorter. "Mom, I'm busy." "Mom, I'll call later." "Mom, you don't have to visit." There's nothing to see. I pretended not to notice the growing distance, the way she laughed a little too loudly when her friends mocked small-town accents, the way she corrected my grammar when I spoke to her on speakerphone. One day she came home for the holidays, wearing heels higher than her humility. She looked beautiful, but she didn't look like mine anymore. Her eyes scanned the apartment as if it were a memory she was trying to erase. "Mom, you still have that old sewing machine?" she asked. "Yes," I smiled. "It was your dad's gift." She rolled her eyes. "You should sell it." "It's outdated." You could use the money. Her words cut deep, but I didn't flinch. I'd learned long ago that love doesn't always come wrapped in respect. Sometimes it comes holding a knife. Later that evening, I overheard her on the phone. "I told them I'm from the city now," she said, laughing. "No one needs to know my mom still lives in that tiny place." Her voice carried pride, but beneath it, I heard fear, the fear of being found out. That night, I sat by my sewing machine and ran my fingers along the needle. I thought about how I'd stitched her school dresses, her graduation gown, her dreams, every thread soaked in my breath. And now she wore those dreams like they were hers alone. When she graduated, she didn't invite me to the ceremony. She sent a picture instead, standing on stage, holding her diploma, her arm around her professor, her smile wide and practiced. I printed that picture, framed it, and placed it next to her father's photo. "She did it, David," I whispered. "Our little girl did it." Months later, she called again. Her tone was sweet, careful. "Mom, there's someone I want you to meet." Her voice carried a different kind of pride, the kind that doesn't ask for blessings, only approval. "He's from a great family," she said. "Educated, successful, well off, not like us." Not like us. That night I couldn't sleep. It wasn't jealousy or fear. It was the quiet ache of being left behind by the very dream you built. When she finally brought him home, Ethan Brooks, he was polite, confident, charming. The kind of man who shook hands instead of offering warmth. He called me Grace. Not Mrs. Miller, just Grace. And something about the way he said it, smooth, casual, dismissive, made my stomach twist. Still, I smiled. Because mothers don't show discomfort. They observe it, store it, and pray they're wrong. As they left that day, I heard him whisper, "You didn't tell me your mom still lives like this." And Emma laughed. That quiet, nervous laugh I'd known since she was a child. "She likes it simple." He chuckled. "Of course." That chuckle stayed with me. Soft, mocking, familiar. It was the same laugh I'd once heard from people who thought my simplicity was weakness. From that day on, peace began to crumble. Not loudly, but in small, invisible pieces. Because betrayal doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it enters wearing cologne and a polite smile. It started with small things, little cuts wrapped in laughter. At first, I told myself they didn't mean anything. But words, when spoken without love, always leave bruises. One Saturday evening, Emma and Ethan came over for dinner. I had cooked everything she used to love, baked chicken, mashed potatoes, my apple pie that always cracked a little on one side. The house smelled warm. I'd even lit the good candles she gave me 2 Christmases ago. When they walked in, she barely looked at me. "Mom, please don't make it a big deal, okay?" He's used to fine dining, not homemade stuff. Her tone was sharp, polite enough to sound civilized, cold enough to wound. I smiled anyway. "Of course, sweetheart." I just wanted it to feel like home. During dinner, Ethan scanned the room like it was a thrift store. He took a small bite of food and said, "It's nice, just different from what I'm used to." Emma laughed, too quickly. "Yeah, Mom still cooks the old-fashioned way. No recipes, just vibes." He grinned. "Vintage, that's cute." They laughed together, and I smiled along, swallowing the ache rising in my throat. When they left, I looked at the untouched apple pie and whispered to myself, maybe next time. But I knew there wouldn't be a next time. After that, her visits became shorter. She stopped staying overnight, said the couch was too small, the air too stuffy. Every time she came, Ethan was glued to his phone, scrolling while she spoke to him in that half-flirty, half-nervous tone women use when they're trying to keep a man interested. I watched quietly, letting my silence speak for me. It's strange how love can make you mute when you should be screaming. A week later, she called to announce the big news. "Mom, we're getting engaged." I froze for a second, then smiled. "That's wonderful, Emma." He wants to host it at the Grand Elm Hotel. Very elegant, very modern. That sounds beautiful. There was a pause. "Also," she continued, "you don't have to worry about clothes. I'll have someone pick something for you. Maybe something simple." "Simple?" I asked. "Yeah, just, classy. Not too bright." "And Mom," she hesitated, "maybe get your hair done before the event?" I said nothing. She took my silence as agreement. And just like that, I became a guest at my own daughter's celebration. A few days later, she came by with Ethan to finalize the guest list. He sat on the couch like he owned it. His phone kept buzzing. Each time he smiled down at the screen a little too long. "Ethan," she said playfully, "who keeps texting you?" He looked up and laughed. "Just work, babe." Chill, I caught the flicker in her eyes. Jealousy, insecurity. But she swallowed it. She always did. When they stood to leave, Ethan pointed at my old Singer sewing machine in the corner. "Still using that antique, Grace?" "It's been with me for years," I said softly. He smirked. "You could probably sell it, get a few bucks, buy yourself something modern." Emma laughed, the same laugh I once loved, now laced with arrogance. "She's attached to it," she said, patting his arm. "She's sentimental like that." I smiled, but my chest felt hollow. For the first time, I realized my daughter wasn't protecting me. She was performing me. That night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights blink from afar. The silence of my apartment wrapped around me like a cold blanket. I wanted to call her, to tell her what I saw in his eyes, that restless gleam of someone who takes more than he gives. But I didn't. Because she wouldn't have listened. She'd already decided her mother's intuition was outdated. A few days before the engagement, I went to church. Mary, the woman who sat beside me every Sunday, squeezed my hand. "You must be proud," she said. "Your girl's marrying into a fine family." I smiled. Yes, proud. But pride felt like a stranger in my mouth. That evening, I tried to reach Emma again. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "I just want you to be sure about him." "Mom," she groaned, "please don't start." "Ethan's amazing. Confident, successful, generous." "Confidence can hide many things," I whispered. "Why do you always look for problems?" "You've never lived my kind of life, Mom. You wouldn't understand. I understand more than you think." She sighed dramatically. "This is why I don't call more often." And then the line went dead. I sat there for a long time, listening to the hum of the old refrigerator, the creak of the chair, the weight of my own quiet heartbreak. It hit me then. Love isn't always lost in grand betrayals. Sometimes it's lost in tone, in laughter that cuts instead of heals, in the space between mom and silence. That was the first night I didn't pray for her happiness. I prayed for her to wake up before the world taught her the same lesson it once taught me, that pride is just pain wearing lipstick. The days before the engagement passed like fog, slow, heavy, and without direction. I moved through my little apartment like a ghost, folding clothes, sewing small repairs for neighbors, cooking for one. The phone stayed quiet most days. If it did ring, it was never her. Emma texted now, short, efficient messages that felt like orders. "Engagement starts at 6. Don't wear bright colors. I'll send a car." No, "Hi, Mom." No, "I love you." Just logistics. As if love had become a calendar event she needed to manage. I didn't blame her? Not yet. You can't hate someone for growing into the world you prayed would love them. But there's a different kind of grief that comes when you realize your child doesn't see you as part of her future, just her past. The morning of the engagement, I woke up early. The air was cold. The city outside felt louder than usual. I ironed my plain navy blue dress, brushed my hair, and pinned on the same pearl clip I wore on my wedding day. It was old, slightly chipped, but it still made me feel like someone worth remembering. When the car arrived, the driver didn't even step out to greet me. He just rolled down the window and said, "You Grace Miller?" I nodded. "Hop in." I did. The drive felt longer than it was. The closer we got to the Grand Elm Hotel, the smaller I felt. By the time we pulled up to the marble entrance, I'd already rehearsed the smile I would wear. Polite, invisible, unbreakable. Inside, everything gleamed. Chandeliers, glass walls, people in clothes that whispered money. And there she was, my daughter. Emma stood in a silver gown that shimmered like moonlight, beautiful, confident, untouchable. She looked nothing like the girl who once fell asleep beside my sewing machine. When she saw me, her smile froze for a fraction of a second, then returned, practiced, and perfect. "Mom, you made it," she said, air-kissing my cheek. "Of course," I whispered. "I wouldn't miss it." She looked me over. Her eyes lingered on my dress. "Simple," she said softly, as if approving a safe choice. "Thank you." I meant it, even though my throat burned. Ethan appeared behind her, tall and polished, his smile the kind that never quite reached his eyes. "Grace," he said, taking my hand briefly, "glad you could make it." His cologne was sharp, expensive, almost arrogant. I nodded. "Thank you for inviting me." He chuckled. "Of course. Family's important." The way he said family made it sound optional. Throughout the evening, I stood in corners, smiling at strangers, watching my daughter glide through the room like she owned the world. People congratulated me, but their voices carried a hint of curiosity, like they were trying to understand how this woman could have raised that girl. I didn't need to hear their words. I'd already lived their judgment. At one point, I caught Emma's eyes across the room. She was laughing, her head tilted back, a glass of champagne in her hand. Beside her, Ethan leaned in to whisper something. She froze for a split second, then laughed louder. It was forced, the kind of laughter that hides a bruise. My stomach tightened. I'd seen that silence before. The silence between my late husband and me in our last months together, when love was already dying, but we were too proud to admit it. Later, during the cake cutting, Emma stood beside Ethan, her hand trembling slightly as he held the knife. When he leaned close, his lips brushed another woman's ear. A guest, young, glamorous, unfamiliar. I saw it, and I knew she did too. Her eyes flickered toward me for half a second, a silent plea she'd never say out loud. I looked back steadily, not with anger, with understanding. She turned away quickly, smiling for the cameras. I watched her perform happiness, and something inside me broke. Not from pity, but from recognition. Because I had been her once. The woman pretending everything was fine because she was afraid of losing what she thought she'd won. When the speeches started, I stood near the back. Ethan spoke first. Charming, articulate, funny. People laughed, clapped, adored him. Then Emma took the mic. "Thank you all for being here," she said, voice shaking just slightly. Especially my mom. "Everything I am today is because of her polite round of applause." Then she added, almost jokingly, "even if she doesn't understand half of it." Laughter rippled through the crowd. My heart dropped, but I smiled anyway, because mothers don't cry in public. When it was over, she came to me, breathless and radiant. "Mom, did you hear what I said?" Everyone laughed. "Yes," I said softly, "they did." She didn't notice the tremor in my voice. She was too busy chasing approval from strangers who would forget her name by morning. That night, when I got home, I didn't take off my dress. I sat in front of the mirror for hours, staring at the reflection of a woman who had loved too gently, spoken too softly, and still lost the child she built her world around. Somewhere deep down, I knew what was coming. Not because I was a mother, but because karma always sends a whisper before it sends a storm. The engagement night was supposed to be perfect. At least that's what Emma had said when she called earlier that day. "Mom, please be early this time," she'd said. "Everything has to look right. Ethan's parents are coming, and some of his clients too. It's important." Her voice carried that careful mixture of excitement and pressure. The sound of someone trying to prove herself to people who would never truly be satisfied. I arrived before the guests did, standing near the floral arch while decorators moved like ants around me. Emma was everywhere, checking centerpieces, adjusting her gown, fixing her hair. When she saw me, she smiled distractedly. "Mom, good, you're here. Could you just stay by the side until everything starts? I'll come get you for pictures." Her words were kind on the surface, but her tone carved deep. Still, I nodded. Of course. As the hall filled with chatter and perfume, I found a quiet corner near the dessert table. I watched her glide through the crowd, radiant, confident, the woman she always wanted to be. Ethan stayed close beside her, his hand resting possessively on her back. He looked perfect. Navy suit, white smile, eyes that sparkled just enough to hide the arrogance behind them. I wanted to be happy for her. I really did. But happiness can't grow in the shadow of unease, and something about the way he leaned into every woman he spoke to, too close, too comfortable, stirred that old familiar knot of intuition in my stomach. Halfway through the evening, I stepped out to the hallway to catch my breath. That's when I saw it. Ethan stood at the end of the corridor, half hidden behind a column, whispering to a woman in a red dress. She was laughing softly, her hand resting on his chest. He wasn't pulling away. He was smiling, the same smile he'd once given my daughter. My heart clenched. I should have turned back inside, but I couldn't move. The woman tilted her head. "You really shouldn't tease me like this, Ethan," she said, loud enough for me to hear. He chuckled. "Then stop giving me reasons to." Her laughter echoed down the hallway. My throat went dry. When Emma called from inside, "Ethan!" Pictures. He straightened instantly, kissed the woman's cheek, and walked back in as if nothing had happened. My hands were trembling. I gripped the tray on the table beside me until the tremor passed. The rest of the night blurred. People laughing, music swelling, my daughter smiling, unaware that her perfect world was already cracking beneath her feet. I left quietly before dessert, but fate had other plans. The next morning, just as the sun began to rise, my phone rang. It was Emma. Her voice was shaky, panicked. "Mom, I need you to come." "What happened?" "Please, just come." Now I dressed quickly and rushed to her apartment. The door was open when I arrived. Inside, the air smelled of perfume and tears. Emma sat on the floor in her gown from the night before, makeup smudged, eyes red and swollen. Her phone lay on the carpet beside her, the screen cracked. "Emma," I whispered, kneeling down. "What's wrong?" She looked up, her lips trembling. "He's gone." "Gone where?" She swallowed hard. He was cheating, Mom." I didn't speak. She took a shaky breath. "Someone sent me pictures. Him with that woman, the one in red." Last night her voice cracked, and when I confronted him, he laughed. Said I was naive, said women like me were replaceable. Her sobs filled the room. For a long moment, I just watched her. My daughter, the same girl who once mocked my simplicity, now breaking under the weight of her own illusion. I wanted to hold her, but my hands wouldn't move. There was a part of me that wanted to comfort her, and another part that whispered, "She needs to feel this." Finally, I spoke. "I warned you, Emma." She looked at me, eyes filled with disbelief and shame. "I know," she whispered. "I should have listened." I nodded slowly. "Love doesn't blind us, darling. Ego does." She crawled toward me then, her head in my lap like she was 6 again. "I treated you so badly," she cried. "I was horrible to you." I ran my hand through her hair, my voice steady. "Yes, you were." She flinched at my honesty. "But," I continued softly, "pain teaches what pride never could." For the next hour, I sat with her as she wept, the kind of crying that comes from the soul, raw and shaking. When she finally looked up, her mascara streaked down her cheeks like black rivers. "What do I do now, Mom?" she whispered. "Stand up," I said. "Wash your face. Eat something. Then remember who raised you." She shook her head. "I can't face anyone." "They'll all know good," I said quietly. "Let them. Maybe it's time you learn that respect isn't given by people who clap for your dress. It's earned by how you survive after the applause stops." She stared at me for a long time, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry." I smiled faintly. "Sorry doesn't fix broken glass, Emma, but it does stop the bleeding." I stood and walked to the window. The city outside was bright and indifferent. Behind me, I could hear her breathing. Slow, shaky, human again. Just then, her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan lit up the screen. "You should have known your place." Emma froze. I picked up the phone, read the message once, and then looked at her. "Do you want to reply?" I asked. She shook her head, tears spilling again. "No," I said firmly. "Don't waste words on men who build confidence out of someone else's pain." I placed the phone on the table, turned to her, and said quietly, "Now you understand why I warned you." For the first time in years, she didn't argue. She just nodded, broken, humbled, finally awake. As I left her apartment, I didn't feel triumph. There was no revenge in my heart, only a strange peace. Because I had learned something too. When life takes your dignity, you fight to get it back. But when someone takes your pride, you thank them. Because pride is the first chain that keeps love blind. That night, she called again. Her voice was small but sincere. "Mom," she whispered, "can I come home?" And for the first time in years, my answer came without hesitation. "Yes," I said, "you always could." For a week after the engagement fell apart, my apartment was filled with silence, the kind that feels heavy enough to breathe on its own. Emma had come back home, her once flawless face now marked by sleepless nights. The mirror she once adored sat turned to the wall. She barely spoke. I didn't push. Sometimes silence teaches better than lectures ever could. One morning, as I was brewing coffee, she appeared in the kitchen doorway. Her hair was tied back loosely, her eyes swollen. "Mom," she said softly, "can we talk?" I nodded, pouring a second cup without asking. She sat across from me, hands trembling. "I keep thinking about everything he said, everything I ignored." Her voice cracked. He'd always tell me who to talk to, what to wear, how to act. I thought it was love. Attention. "It wasn't love," I said quietly. "It was control dressed as care." She looked up. "Why didn't I see it?" "Because he made you believe being chosen was the same as being loved." Her eyes filled again, but this time with anger instead of tears. "I want to know who she was, Mom, the woman in the red dress." I held her gaze. "Then find out. But do it with your head, not your heart." That afternoon, I watched her scroll through her phone, her fingers shaking. Every message, every photo, fragments of a story she'd been too blind to read before. Then she stopped. "Mom," she whispered, "look." It was a text from Ethan, dated weeks before the engagement. "Don't worry, she won't find out. The ring's just for show until the business deal clears." My breath caught. "Business deal?" Emma nodded, pale. "He asked me to invest in his startup." I transferred my savings. He said it would double in 6 months. I stared at her, my voice low. "How much?" She hesitated. "Almost everything." For a long time, I didn't move. Then I stood, walked to the window, and stared at the skyline. The city that had taught my daughter ambition but not caution. Finally, I said, "We'll get it back." That night, after she fell asleep, I went through the papers she'd left on the dining table. Bank receipts, wire transfers, all under her name. To Ethan Brooks Holdings, LLC. Except the company didn't exist anymore. It had been dissolved 3 weeks before the engagement. I sat there till dawn, piecing together the story like a quilt of deceit. He'd used her, her name, her innocence, her savings. And once the performance was over, he'd walked away with everything that mattered. When morning came, I didn't cry. Some pains are too old to need tears. Instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Mary Thompson, my old friend from church. Mary still worked part-time at the county clerk's office. After a few minutes of small talk, I lowered my voice. "Mary, could you look up a business name for me?" There was silence, then her soft, concerned voice. "Grace, what are you getting into?" "Not revenge," I said. "Just truth." By evening, she called back. Grace, she whispered, that company name, and it's registered under another woman's address, someone named Lauren Pierce. My stomach tightened. Lauren, I repeated. Does it list an associate? Yes, she said, a secondary signature. Ethan Brooks. I thanked her, my voice steady, though my pulse was racing. I'd heard that name before, not just from Emma's story, but from a conversation at the engagement. A man at the bar had said, Lauren's late, but she always makes an entrance. I hadn't paid attention then. Now I did. I sat Emma down that night. She looked terrified when I mentioned the name. Lauren Pierce? She repeated. That's his business partner. He said she was helping with the event planning. I handed her the printed records Mary had sent. She wasn't planning your engagement, Emma. She was planning your downfall. She stared at the papers, her mouth trembling. Oh my God, her voice dropped to a whisper. He used me. Yes, I said quietly, but he underestimated who raised you. For the first time in weeks, I saw something return to her eyes. Not arrogance, not pride, but resolve. We spent the next few days gathering proof, messages, transactions, photos. Emma called the bank, filed a report, and contacted a lawyer. Each call stripped away another layer of her shame, replacing it with strength. I watched her carefully, letting her fight her own battle, but never leaving her side. There's a kind of justice that doesn't need shouting. It just waits for truth to do the work. A week later, Mary called again. Grace, she said, you'll want to see this. That woman, Lauren, she just filed a case against Ethan, fraud. I smiled faintly. Karma had arrived early, and she brought paperwork. When I told Emma, she didn't smile. She just whispered, Does that mean I'll get my money back? Maybe, I said softly, but what matters more is that you got yourself back. That night, she hugged me for the first time in years, really hugged me. Her tears soaked my shoulder, but her breath was steady. Mom, she whispered, I don't deserve you. I pulled back gently, cupping her face. No one deserves love, Emma. They just have to respect it when it's given. The next morning, she joined me at the sewing table. For hours, we sat together. I stitching, she watching. Both of us quiet, both healing. The air between us no longer heavy with pride or pain, but with something fragile and new. And as the needle moved in and out of the fabric, I realized something I'd never said aloud. Karma doesn't always take. Sometimes it returns what was lost, one stitch at a time. The day we finally faced the truth began like any other. Gray skies, soft rain tapping against the window, the kind of weather that makes you remember things you tried to forget. Emma had grown quieter over the past week, but not weak. There was something different in her silence now. It wasn't guilt anymore. It was resolve. I found her at the kitchen table, papers spread out, her laptop open. She was reading an email from the bank. Confirmation that Ethan's accounts were being frozen for investigation. Her lips trembled as she read. He really did it, Mom. He stole from me. From others, too, I nodded. That's how men like him survive. They feed on people who confuse charm with character. She looked up at me, her eyes glassy. I want to face him. I need to. I studied her. The steadiness in her shoulders, the lack of hesitation. You're sure? You're sure? She nodded once. I can't move on until I look him in the eye and take my power back. So I didn't stop her, because sometimes the only way to heal is to walk straight through the fire that burned you. We found him at his new apartment, a downtown condo he hadn't earned, filled with furniture too expensive for the man I knew he was. Emma knocked once, twice. When he opened the door, his face flickered. Surprise, then irritation, then a smooth, artificial smile. Emma, Grace. Didn't expect company, clearly, I said, glancing past him at the half-empty wine glass on the table. She stepped inside without asking. We need to talk. He shrugged, leaning against the counter, arms folded. You look upset. Is this about the little misunderstanding with the money? Her voice trembled, but only slightly. You mean the money you stole? He laughed, that same arrogant sound that used to make her blush. Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. It was an investment risk. You knew that I stepped closer, my voice calm. You dissolved the company 3 weeks before she transferred the funds. He froze for half a second, just enough for me to know we'd hit the truth. Emma's eyes widened. So it's true? Ethan straightened, recovering his smirk. Look, I was under pressure. The deal fell through, and I had to move the money. I was going to fix it. By marrying me? She snapped. He didn't answer. The silence in that moment was sharp, alive. Then Emma laughed, short, bitter. You know, I thought you made me feel small because I wasn't good enough. Turns out you just needed someone easy to manipulate. He raised his brow. Watch your tone. Or what? She said coldly. You'll scam another woman? Steal another dream? He opened his mouth, but I stepped between them. Enough. My voice was low, but it carried weight. Years of silence had trained it well. You don't get to rewrite the story, Ethan. You don't get to hurt my daughter and call it a lesson. You get to face what you built. Lie by lie. He glared at me, jaw tight. You think you can scare me, old lady? I smiled faintly. No, but truth will, I took a small envelope from my bag and placed it on his table. Inside were copies of the bank records, screenshots of messages, and the fraud report with his name on it. Emma's lawyer had filed the official complaint that morning. His eyes darted across the papers, his smirk fading. This won't stick, he muttered. You don't have proof, Oh, but we do, I interrupted softly. And the woman you worked with? Lauren Pierce? She already filed her own case. She's testifying against you to save herself. His face drained of color. She wouldn't. She already did. He slammed his hand on the counter, rage surfacing now. You think you're better than me? You think anyone's going to believe 2 women crying fraud after they threw money away? No, I said quietly. I think they'll believe the security footage from the hotel lobby the night before the engagement. The one where you're seen handing Lauren an envelope. The police did for the first time. His voice broke. You went to the police. I smiled. A slow, steady smile that came from deep inside me. I warned you, I said, echoing my own words to my daughter. Karma doesn't rush. It waits. Emma stood taller beside me now, her tears gone, her voice calm. You know what's funny, Ethan? You used to say I'd never survive without you, but look at me now. I'm finally breathing. He didn't answer. We left him standing there, in that pristine, hollow apartment that smelled of greed and fear, while the truth he'd built his life on finally began to crumble. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered across wet pavement. Emma looked up at the sky and exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. Back home, she sat by the sewing table, watching me mend a tear in her old dress. She smiled faintly. You always fix things, don't you? I looked at her. No, honey. I just teach what can be repaired and what should be left broken. She nodded, her voice low. I should have listened to you. I threaded the needle and said softly, You weren't supposed to listen. You were supposed to learn. She reached out, holding my hand. Thank you for not saying, I told you so. I smiled. I didn't need to. Life already did. The next morning, a call came from the police department. They'd detained Ethan for questioning. Fraud, false representation, and intent to deceive. Emma's funds would be recovered once the case processed. She broke down crying again, not from pain this time, but release. And I just held her, my fingers brushing her hair like when she was little. The circle had closed. The same hands that once rocked her through nightmares were now guiding her through rebirth. That evening, we sat on the porch together, sipping tea. The sun dipped low, turning the sky gold. Emma leaned her head on my shoulder. I used to think you were old-fashioned, she whispered, but you were just wise. I laughed softly. Both can be true. We sat there in silence, the good kind, the kind that heals. Because sometimes truth doesn't roar. It just sits beside you quietly, letting the world finally make sense again. The news broke faster than we expected. 2 days after our confrontation, Ethan's face was everywhere. Not on wedding invitations, but in headlines. Local entrepreneur accused of investment fraud. Multiple victims file case against Brooks. The same people who once toasted to his success now whispered his name with pity. Emma saw the first headline online. She didn't scream or cry. She just stared at the screen, her face pale, her voice flat. "It's public now," she whispered. "Yes," I said quietly, "and truth doesn't need our permission to be heard." By noon, her phone started ringing nonstop. Friends, colleagues, strangers pretending to care. Everyone wanted the story. No one wanted the truth. At first, she didn't answer. Then she did. One call too many. It was one of her old friends from college, the kind who'd once mocked her small-town roots. "I told you he was trouble," the woman said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Emma hung up mid-sentence. She turned to me, her eyes glistening. "They're all talking about me, not him." "They're saying I was stupid." I stepped closer. "Let them talk. Let them forget. But you remember that evening she decided to go out, not to hide, but to face it." There was a small charity event at the same hotel where her engagement had taken place. She dressed simply, black dress, no jewelry, no mask. "I have to reclaim the place I lost myself," she said. I nodded. "Then walk in with your head high. You've already faced worse, your reflection." When we arrived, conversations hushed. Whispers followed her through the lobby like shadows. Some faces offered sympathy, most offered curiosity. Ethan was there too, out on bail, arrogant as ever, standing near the bar, pretending the world still admired him. He saw her. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Discomfort, maybe fear, but he hid it behind a smirk. Well, he said as we approached. "Didn't think you'd show up." Emma's voice was calm. "That's because you never really knew me." He chuckled, sipping his drink. "Still pretending you're the victim?" She tilted her head. "Not pretending. Learning." The room began to quiet. People nearby pretended not to listen, which of course meant everyone was. Ethan leaned closer, whispering, "You think this little scandal will ruin me? I'll rebuild. You'll still be that small-town girl who embarrassed herself chasing love." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "You're right. I did chase love, but what I caught was a lesson." Then she turned, not to him, but to the small crowd that had gathered. Her voice was steady, almost serene. "For anyone wondering," she said, "yes, I trusted him. I believed in him. And I lost more than money. I lost the version of myself that thought being loved by someone like him meant I was worth something." Her eyes met mine briefly. "But I'm done letting arrogance define me. I'm not here to prove I was innocent. I'm here to say, I survived." A quiet murmur spread through the room. Ethan tried to laugh, but the sound fell flat. "Bravo," he said mockingly. "You'll make a great motivational speaker." Emma's gaze didn't waver. "You'll make a great cautionary tale." The crowd's silence grew heavier, and for the first time I saw him falter. Just a fraction, but enough to know he felt the shift. Power had changed hands, quietly, irrevocably. He turned to leave, muttering under his breath. That's when a woman's voice stopped him. It was Lauren Pierce. She stepped out from the corner, elegant, composed, her tone razor-sharp. "Leaving so soon, Ethan? I think the press wanted your statement." He froze. "I told them you'd be here," she added, smiling. "They're outside." The color drained from his face. Without another word, he pushed past her and walked out. Emma exhaled, trembling. The tension in her body melted as if years of shame had fallen away in that single moment. I reached for her hand. She squeezed it. "Let's go home," I said softly. She nodded, whispering, I think I just got my voice back. As we stepped out of the hotel, cameras flashed in the distance, not on us, but on him. The man who had once mocked humility was now being photographed in handcuffs. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just lets the world watch. When we got home, Emma walked straight to the sewing machine. She touched its metal frame, the same one she once called outdated. "I used to hate this thing," she said softly. "It built your life," I whispered. She smiled faintly. "No, Mom." "You did." And then in the quiet of that small apartment that had once felt too small for her dreams, she said the words I'd been waiting years to hear. "You were right." I smiled, my eyes wet but my voice firm. "Not right, sweetheart. Just patient." That night, as she slept peacefully for the first time in months, I stood by the window watching the city lights flicker like old memories. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed awake, praying she'd learn what love really meant, and now she had, painfully, beautifully, completely. Because betrayal doesn't destroy character, it reveals it, and mine, finally, had come home. Weeks passed. The court hearings began, each one stripping another layer of Ethan's charm away for the world to see. What once looked like sophistication now looked like arrogance. What once sounded confident now rang hollow. Emma and I sat through each session. She didn't cry anymore. She took notes. She spoke clearly when asked to testify. Her voice didn't shake, not because she wasn't nervous, but because she finally knew her truth didn't need permission to be believed. When the verdict came, the room was silent. Ethan Brooks, guilty on multiple counts of fraud and falsified documentation. He was sentenced to time in federal custody and restitution of stolen funds. I didn't smile. Neither did Emma. Justice doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes with quiet breathing, knowing the storm is finally over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. "Miss Miller, any comment?" Emma paused, her eyes calm, her posture straight. "I just hope people learn to listen to their instincts. And their mothers," she said softly. Her words went viral that night. But for me, the real victory wasn't in the headlines. It was in her tone. No bitterness, no arrogance, just strength. Back home, life slowly began to unfold again, not like a movie ending, more like a sunrise that refuses to rush. Emma got a job offer from a design firm. She started helping me with my small sewing business, setting up an online page, photographing the dresses I made. "People need to see this, Mom," she said one morning. "Your work deserves light." I smiled, threading the needle. "Some things shine best in silence." She laughed. "You and your one-liners. You should write a book." "Maybe someday," I said. That weekend, she surprised me. She'd found my old sketches, the designs I used to draw when I dreamed of opening a small boutique. "You should start this again," she said. "We can call it Grace Threads." The name made me laugh. "A little on the nose, don't you think?" "It's perfect," she said, "because you taught me what grace really means, standing tall without shouting." We launched the page together. Simple photos, honest captions, no filters. To our surprise, people noticed. Orders trickled in, then poured in. Women wrote messages, stories about strength, heartbreak, healing. One said, "Your designs feel like peace sewn into fabric." I cried when I read that. It was strange. The same world that once made me feel invisible now wanted a piece of my authenticity. But I didn't resent it. I just kept stitching. Because I knew what this really was, karma finishing her work, one thread at a time. One evening, Emma and I were closing up when the doorbell rang. I opened it and found Mary Thompson standing there, smiling warmly. "I just wanted to see the woman everyone's talking about online," she said. "Grace Threads. It's beautiful." She handed me a small envelope. "A little something from the church committee. We're hosting a women's entrepreneurship fair next month. They want you to be a keynote speaker." I froze. "Me? Speak?" Mary nodded. "They want you to talk about resilience, about motherhood, about forgiveness." That word, forgiveness, lingered. Because even though Ethan was behind bars, I hadn't forgiven him. Not yet. But that night, as I lay in bed, I thought about it. Not for him, but for me. Forgiveness isn't permission, it's release. And I realized I was tired of carrying the weight of a man who'd already lost everything that mattered. So I forgave him, quietly, without words, without ceremony. Because real revenge is peace that no one can take from you. A few weeks later, Emma accompanied me to the fair. I stood on that stage in front of 100 women, some smiling, some teary-eyed, all listening. I told them my story. Not every detail, just enough. How love can turn to pride, how pride can turn to blindness, and how blindness can turn to strength when you finally open your eyes. I ended with this. Justice isn't about someone else's punishment. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself you thought were gone. And sometimes, justice looks like waking up one morning and realizing you're not angry anymore, just free. The room went silent. Then it erupted in applause. Emma stood in the front row, clapping with tears streaming down her face, and I realized in that moment, this was our true ending. Not the courtroom, not the headlines, not even the business. It was this, the healing between us. That night, as we walked home, she slipped her arm through mine. "Mom," she said softly, "do you think we deserved all this pain?" I thought for a moment. No, but we needed it. She frowned. Needed it? Yes, I said, because pain has one purpose, to make you see clearly. She nodded slowly, understanding now what words couldn't teach. We passed by a shop window, her reflection beside mine. For the first time, she didn't look away. When we reached home, I made tea. She sat by the sewing table, watching the needle move up and down. After a while, she whispered, "You know what I learned, Mom?" "What's that?" "That karma doesn't punish, it educates." I smiled, lifting my cup. "And you, my dear, are finally a graduate." We laughed, softly, freely, completely. 2 years passed, not quickly, not quietly, but kindly. Time didn't erase the scars, it turned them into stories. Grace Threads had grown, not into a fashion empire, but into something gentler, purer. Each design carried a name: strength, patience, rebirth. Women ordered dresses not for weddings or parties, but for beginnings, job interviews, new homes, second chances. I'd tell Emma, "We don't sell clothes, sweetheart. We sell courage you can wear." She'd laugh and say, "Put that on a banner." Our home had changed too, not in size but in light. The walls that once echoed with silence now hummed with chatter. Customers, deliveries, laughter, even the old sewing machine with its chipped wheel and silver scars seemed to sing again. Emma worked beside me now, designing, managing, sometimes just listening. There were moments when I'd catch her looking at me the way she used to look at mirrors, with admiration instead of distance. Once she said softly, "You know, Mom, every time I stitch something, I feel like I'm fixing a piece of myself." I smiled. That's what creation is. Repair, disguised as beauty. Every so often, she'd get messages from people asking about the scandal, the story that had once defined her. She no longer replied with anger or shame. Her favorite line was simple: "That's not my ending anymore." One evening, while closing up the shop, I found her reading an old notebook, the one she'd used in college. Between her sketches and notes, there was a list written in her younger handwriting. Things I'll never become. Poor, ordinary, invisible. She laughed softly, shaking her head. Funny, isn't it? The things we fear most are usually the ones that teach us who we are. I sat beside her and said, "And the things we love most, sometimes they come back as blessings wearing scars." Outside, the sky turned the color of honey, the kind of sunset that makes you believe in second chances. Emma leaned her head on my shoulder, and for a while, we didn't say anything, because there are moments when silence says everything, apology, gratitude, forgiveness, all folded into one breath. Later that night, as I walked past her room, I saw her sleeping. Peacefully this time. No phone under her pillow, no tears, no shadows. Just rest. I stood in the doorway and whispered, "Good night, my lesson and my miracle." The next morning, a small box arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a silver bracelet, simple, beautiful, with a small charm engraved with 3 words. You were right. No signature, but I knew. Ethan. I didn't cry. I didn't forgive him again. I just smiled, not for him, but for myself. Because that charm wasn't an apology. It was closure. And closure, when it finally comes, doesn't need words. That evening, Emma found the bracelet. She looked at me, confused. "Are you going to keep it?" I shook my head. "No, I think it's time we stop wearing the past." We melted it down a week later, turned it into a new charm for our shop window, a small silver thread looped into the shape of a heart. Underneath, a sign that read, "Grace Threads, where broken things become beautiful." Business grew. But more than that, peace grew. There were no more whispers, no more shame, only stories shared over tea, laughter that didn't hide pain, and the quiet rhythm of a sewing machine stitching a future one thread at a time. Sometimes, customers would ask about our logo, the heart-shaped thread. I'd tell them, it's not just our brand, it's our truth. And if they stayed long enough, I'd tell them the story behind it. Not to gain sympathy, but to remind them that every mistake, every heartbreak, every betrayal can become fabric for something good, because redemption isn't a gift you receive. It's something you make, stitch by stitch, choice by choice. 5 years later. The house smells of jasmine and freshly brewed coffee. Sunlight spills across the wooden floor, catching the dust like little pieces of memory. There's music in the background, something soft, something peaceful. Emma's laughter floats in from the porch, bright and unguarded, the kind of laughter that doesn't hide anymore. She's helping a young girl learn to stitch, guiding her hand slowly across the fabric. Patience, she tells her, isn't about waiting. It's about working while you wait. I stand in the doorway watching. She doesn't notice me. She's too focused on teaching, on giving, and I realize she's become me, not in the way she dresses or talks, but in the way she heals others without needing to prove she once broke too. Grace Threads has become more than a business now. It's a small movement, a space where women come to rebuild, to learn skills, to share tea and stories instead of silence. Every stitch, every fabric carries a fingerprint of recovery. The heart-shaped silver charm still hangs above the window, glinting softly in the light. Sometimes, visitors ask for me. They expect to meet the woman who once lived in shadows. Instead, they find someone who learned to make light from them. I don't speak much during interviews. I've learned that not every truth needs to be retold. Some truths live better in peace. When they ask what inspired me, I always say, my daughter. Because she's both my wound and my miracle, the lesson life gave me wrapped in love and rebellion. Emma still visits her father's grave on his birthday. She takes flowers and sits there quietly. No tears, no anger, just gratitude. Because she knows that even the people who leave us too early still shape the story we live later. As for Ethan, I heard he was released early for good behavior. I don't wish him harm. I don't wish him anything at all. He's just a closed chapter in a book that taught us everything we needed to know about human mirrors. How some people show you who you could become, and others show you who you should never be. Sometimes, late at night, I walk past the sewing room. The machine hums softly under Emma's hands as she works on new designs. There's peace in that sound, rhythmic, alive, eternal. I whisper to myself, "You did well, Grace. Not perfectly, not easily, but well, because a mother's justice isn't about revenge. It's about raising a woman strong enough to forgive herself. Before bed, I look at the mirror by my desk, the same one Emma once said she loved because it showed the life she wanted. Now it reflects the life we built, a life stitched with mistakes, mended with mercy, and finished with peace. And to everyone listening, if you've ever been betrayed, belittled, or broken, remember this: karma doesn't always strike loud. Sometimes it sows quietly, one truth at a time, until the pattern of your pain becomes the masterpiece of your strength. So take a deep breath and don't rush your justice, because when it finally comes, it won't taste bitter. It'll taste like freedom. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing these truths that too many women live quietly. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? I love knowing how far these stories travel.